back to 65. Myself Srija. So today in this session you're going to learn about the internal structure of the kidney and also the anatomy of ureters. So in the previous session you have learned about what is the external structure of the kidney. So now let's go into about the internal structure of the kidney. So when you cut a kidney longitudinally, like from top to bottom, you can clearly see two main regions. What are the two main regions? The one is renal cortex, the other is renal medulla. So now what is the renal cortex? So where it is located? It is located at the outermost layer of the kidney. So it looks granular, like grainy, because of many tiny structures. So what does it contains? Renal corpuscles. So this renal corpuscles, it includes the glomerulus, which is a network of capillaries. So it also consists of the Bowman's capsule, which is a cup-like structure surrounding the glomerulus. So this is where the filtration of the blood begins. So it also contains the proximal and distal convoluted tubules. So these are the tubes which are involved in reabsorption and also secretion. So these tubules, they are important for adjusting water, salts and also the nutrients. So then it forms the cortical columns. So cortical columns, these are also called as columns of Buttin. So these are the extensions of the cortex that go between the pyramids in medulla, and also they provide the structural support and contain the blood vessels. So what is the key function of the cortex? So nothing but filtration. So this cortex, it starts making urine from the blood. So the second region is renal medulla. So renal medulla, it's the inner part of the kidney. It has a striped or striated appearance due to long loops and ducts. So what does it contain? It contains 8 to 18 renal pyramids. So it is a triangular shaped structure. It is made up of loops of Henle and also the collecting ducts. So why these renal pyramids are important? Because the apex of each pyramid is renal papilla. So the urine drains from the papilla into the minor calyx. So what is the key function of medulla? The concentration of urine. So the key function of cortex is filtration, whereas key function of medulla is concentration of urine. It makes urine more concentrated by removing the water. So what is the flow of urine? What is the simple sequence? Renal papilla to minor calyx to major calyx, and major calyx to renal pelvis, and then to ureter. From ureter, it is to urinary bladder. So this is the sequence how the urine flows. And at the right side, you can see the clear picture which shows you the renal cortex and renal medulla, which we have discussed now. So renal cortex, which is the outer brownish area, you can see in this picture, and renal medulla, it is the inner dark red area with the pyramids. So you can see here the triangular structures, these are all called as pyramids, nothing but the renal pyramids. These are the triangular sections. So next is the renal papilla. So this is a tip of the pyramid where the urine exists. And then renal columns. So renal columns, it is a cortex tissue between the pyramids. So you can see a space between the pyramids, right? So these are called as renal columns. And then renal artery and vein, these are for blood supply. And you can find here the ileum, which is the entry or exit point for vessels and ureter. And renal pelvis, which is a large funnel collecting the urine, and ureter, it is a tube carrying urine to the urinary bladder. So then about renal sinus. So what is renal sinus? It is a hollow space inside the kidney. So it contains the structures that help in the collection and also the transfer of urine. So what are the contents of the renal sinus? So minor calyces, which rises to major calyces. So they collect the urine from the renal papilla and they send it to the major calyx. And then renal pelvis. So it is a funnel shaped structure that collects all the urine and part of a ureter. So that what is a ureter? It is a tube carrying urine to the bladder. And this renal sinus, it also contains about the fat, blood vessels, nerves and lymphatics which protect and supply the kidney. And what is the functional unit of the kidney? So see, this is the most important point you have to remember. What is the functional unit of the kidney? We call it as nephron. So why is nephron important? because it performs the main job of the kidney like filtering blood, reabsorbing the useful substances, producing urine. So how many number of nephrons are present in each kidney? So each kidney, it contains around 1 million nephrons. Like if there is more nephrons, it gives a better kidney function. Okay, so there are types of nephrons. How many types of nephrons are present in kidney? Cortical nephrons and juxtamedullary nephrons. So cortical nephrons, they contribute about 85% of the kidney. So these are located mostly in the cortex area. So these have a short loop of Henle. So what is the function of cortical nephron? Everyday filtration. It does filtrate every day. So it's more common, but it is less involved in concentrating the urine. And the next type of nephron is juxtamedullary nephron, which is 15%. So this is located near the boundary of cortex and also about the medulla. So this have a long loop of Henle that extends deep into the medulla. So what is the function? It is essential for producing the concentrated urine. It helps to save water in conditions like dehydration. So short loop means a common work, whereas long loop, it gives a special work like concentrating urine. So next, coming to the structure of the functional unit called as nephron. So what is the structure of the nephron? So nephron, it consists of many parts. The first part is renal corpuscle. So what is renal corpuscle? It consists of both glomerulus and also the Bowman's capsule. So renal corpuscle, it is a starting point of the urine formation. So glomerulus, it is a network of capillaries. Like it filters blood like a sieve. It produces a filtrate, nothing but the primitive urine. Whereas Bowman's capsule, it is a complex structure covering the glomerulus. It also collects the filtrate. So this is a picture of the nephron, which is the function unit of kidney. And in this picture, you can see all the parts of the nephron. So this is the Bowman's capsule and glomerulus together, they form the renal corpuscle. And you can find the distal convoluted tubule, the tubular system, the proximal convoluted tubule, and this is the collecting tubule. And this is a loop of Henle, the descending limb of Henle of loop, and ascending limb of loop of the Henle. And you can find here the renal artery and renal vein which carries the blood, and also afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. So then coming to tubular system, which is after the filtration. And here in this picture, you can find the PCT and DCT. So this is PCT is the first tubule after the Bowman's capsule. It reabsorbs the 65% of water, glucose, amino acids, and electrolytes. So this is very efficient. Like it is also called as a reabsorption powerhouse. And loop of Henle, which you can see in this picture, it has two limbs. The descending limb, it is the limb where the water lives, and ascending limb, the salts like sodium and calcium leave. So this helps to concentrate the urine, and also this is the longest in juxtamedullary nephrons. So coming to DCT. So DCT, it is a fine tuning area. It helps to regulate the sodium and potassium as well as the pH balance. So this DCT, it is controlled by the hormones like aldosterone. And here this is the long structure, the long tube structure is called as collecting tubule, or also called as the collecting duct. And this is a duct where the final urine formation takes place, and this is controlled by antidiuretic hormone. So this determines how much water to keep or remove. So blood supply. So renal artery and renal vein, they supply the blood, right? So why it is important for nephron? So afferent arteriole, it brings the blood into the glomerulus, and efferent arteriole, it carries the blood out. So this efferent arteriole, it forms the peritubular capillaries or the vasa recta in the juxtamedullary nephrons. So these vessels, they help to reabsorb water and also the nutrients back into the water. Yeah, I have discussed you about the Bowman's capsule, right? So this Bowman's capsule, it surrounds the glomerulus, and also it has two layers. The one is parietal layer and the other is visceral layer. So this parietal layer, it is the outer layer. It is made up of simple squamous cells, and also it provides the structure and protection. Then what is the visual layer? It is the inner layer. So this is made up of the podocyte cells. So podocytes, they have the food processes that form the filtration slits. So Bowman's capsule, it acts like a cup-like structure that collects the filtered fluid coming out of the glomerulus. So next is filtration membrane. So this is a three-layer barrier that filters blood to form the urine. So what is a three-layer barrier? Fenestrated endothelium, basement membrane and podocyte slit diaphragm. So what is fenestrated endothelium? So these are the capillaries with the small pores. So they allow the water and also small molecules to pass through. They also block the blood cells as even the large proteins. And the second membrane is basement membrane. So basement membrane, it is a thick gel-like layer. It acts like a strong filter and it also blocks most proteins and it is very much important in filtration. And the third membrane is podocyte slit diaphragm. So these podocytes, they wrap around the capillaries. So these are the spaces between them which form the slit diaphragms. So this podocyte slit, it is a final filtering step before the filtrate enters the Bowman's space. And next coming to renal tubules. We have discussed about the renal tubules in the diagram. What are those? The proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle and distal convoluted tubule. So now what is PCT? It is located in the renal cortex. So what is the structure? It is lined with the cuboidal cells which is containing long microvilli which has the brush border. And the main function of the PCT is it's a major site of reabsorption. So what does it reabsorbs? It reabsorbs 65% of water. It reabsorbs nearly all the glucose and amino acids. It reabsorbs the electrolytes like sodium, calcium and also bicarbonate ions. So what are the secreted substances that PCT do? H plus ions, drugs and also the toxins. So PCT is also called as recycling center of the nephron because it reabsorbs most of the useful substances back into the blood. And second renal tubule is loop of Henle. So loop of Henle, it has two limbs with the opposite functions. The one is descending limb which is thin and permeable to water. So water leaves through this tubule where the filtrate becomes more concentrated. Whereas ascending limb, it is thick and impermeable to water. Like it pumps out the calcium ion, sodium ion and also chlorine and potassium. So it dilutes filtrate because the salts leave but water stays. So what is a counter current multiplier system? So this is created by the opposite flow in the two limbs. So it helps to produce the concentrated urine which works best in the juxtamedullary nephrons. So the descending limb removes the water, ascending limb removes the salt. So together they create a concentration gradient needed to save the water. You just remember these points. So next tubule is distal convoluted tubule which is also called as DCT. So DCT, it is located in the cortex. So this is the fine tunes that composition of the filtrate. It also responds to hormones like aldosterone, it absorbs sodium and eliminates potassium ions. PTH, it increases the calcium reabsorption and it helps to regulate the pH electrolytes. So together they create a concentration gradient. So this DCT, it has less microvilli. Like compared to PCT, the DCT has fewer microvilli. It means less reabsorption happens here. So aldosterone sensitive. So DCT is aldosterone sensitive. Why? Because aldosterone is a hormone which is from the adrenal gland, which is released from the adrenal gland. So it also increases the sodium reabsorption and the potassium secretion in DCT. So where sodium goes, water follows, and where water follows, it increases the blood pressure. So DCT, it also regulates the electrolytes. So it helps to balance the sodium, potassium, calcium under PTH, like under parathyroid hormone. And it also balances the hydrogen ions which maintains the pH levels. So DCT, it keeps the body salt, acid-base balance and also the minerals in the correct levels. So next tubule is collecting duct and papillary duct. So this collecting duct, it receives the urine from many nephrons. like multiple DCTs drain into one collecting duct. So collecting ducts merge to form a papillary ducts, like many small roads joining into a highway. So ADH control water reabsorption. So ADH is nothing but antidiuretic hormone. So this controls the permeability of the collecting ducts to the water. So more ADH, it gives more water reabsorbed and more concentrated urine. If in the cases of less ADH, more water lost, which results in diluted urine. So ADH is like a water saving mode in the kidney. So this collecting tube, it opens at renal papilla. So the papillary ducts ends at the renal papilla. The urine flows from papilla to minor calyx to major calyx, and then renal pelvis to ureter, ureter to bladder. So this is about the internal structure of the kidney. So next, coming to the second part of the urinary system called as ureters. So what are ureters? These are two thin muscular tubes that carry the urine from each kidney to the urinary bladder. So you have to think them as a flexible pipes that transport the urine continuously. So what are the general features of the ureters? So what is the length of ureter? It is 25 to 30 centimeter, about the length of a standard scale. So this is long enough to run from kidney to the bladder. So next diameter is 3 to 4 millimeter. So this is a very narrow lumen which is the inner passage. So this is why the kidney stones can easily get stuck within the ureter. So what is the function of the ureter? The ureter, the main function is to transport the urine to urinary bladder. So these ureters, they use a peristaltis, which is a wave-like muscular contractions. So it also uses the gravity where urine flows downward, and it uses the hydrostatic pressure where the pressure of urine formed in the kidney. So ureters, they do not depend only on the gravity, so they actively push urine to the bladder. So it extends from renal pelvis to urinary bladder. So these ureters, they start at the renal pelvis, which is a funnel at a kidney end, and also it ends at the posterior side of the bladder. Retroperitoneal throughout their course. So this is located behind the peritoneum, which is a membrane in the abdomen. So all the major urinary structures are retroperitoneal, which are protected and stable in the function. So this is the general features of ureters. So next is parts of the ureter. So what are the parts of the ureter? Ureter has three anatomical parts as it travels downward through urinary bladder. So what is the first part? Abdominal part, which is the upper part. So this lies in the abdomen from renal pelvis to pelvic brim. So it runs over the muscles like a psoas major. It is crossed by the gonadal vessels, which are important in the anatomy. So the second part is the middle part is the pelvic part, which begins at the pelvic brim, which enters the true pelvis and runs closely to the reproductive organs. So in males, it is situated near the vas deferens, whereas in females, near the uterine artery. So the third part, the terminal part, is intramural part. So it is a very short part. It travels within the bladder wall and it opens into the bladder at the ureteric orifice. So why intramural part is important? Because it acts like a valve to prevent the urine from flowing backward. Nothing but reflex mechanism. So the bladder wall compresses it as a bladder fills. So here is a diagram which shows the parts of the ureter. So this is the abdominal segment, pelvic segment and intramural segment. So the part of the ureter from kidney to the bladder. This is the bladder, right? So kidney position is higher. So bladder position at the bottom, which is the pelvis. So ureter is a muscular water pipe which squeezes the urine downwards, nothing but the peristaltis movement. Okay. So now we will discuss about the parts of the ureter briefly. So what is the abdominal part? It begins at the renal pelvis, which is a lumbar level 1. The ureter starts where the kidney narrows into the funnel called as the renal pelvis. So this happens around the L1, which is the first lumbar vertebrae level. It descends vertically on the psoas major muscle. Like it lies on the top of the psoas major muscle, a large muscle in the abdomen. And then it is crossed by gonadal vessels anteriorly. Like the gonadal vessels, they passes in the front of the ureter. So the important anatomy relationship is the gonadal vessels, they crosses the ureter anteriorly. So medial to tips of the transverse process of the lumbar vertebrae. So this means the ureter runs slightly towards the midline compared to the bony projections of the spine. So ureter sits on the psoas, gonadal vessels cross it in front. So this is how you have to remember this abdominal part. So the second part is pelvic part. So it enters the pelvis by crossing the pelvic brim at the sacroiliac joint. So it moves from the abdomen into the pelvis by crossing the pelvic brim near the sacroiliac joint. So this is sacroiliac joint where the spine meets the hip bone. So there is a difference of the pelvic part in males and females. In males, ureter passes under the ductus deferens. So water under the bridge. Water is nothing but the ureter, which is the urine, and bridge is ductus deferens. Whereas in females, the ureter passes under the uterine artery. So again, water under the bridge. Bridge is nothing but the uterine artery. So it also runs close to the lateral wall of the vagina and cervix. So during hysterectomy, so the ureter is at risk because it lies very close to the uterine artery. So the third part is intramural part. So it is a short segment inside the bladder wall. So intramural is nothing but the name it gives you the meaning of inside the wall. So this is a final short segment of the ureter that passes through the bladder wall. So it is oblique entry into the posterior lateral bladder wall. Like it enters the bladder at an angle and it is located at the posterior lateral side, which is a back plus side area. And the oblique course prevents the urine reflex. So it acts like a natural wall. So when the bladder fills, the pressure compresses the ureter opening. So that means it prevents the backflow of the urine into the ureter. So these are about the parts of the ureter. So next is the structure of the ureter. So what is the histology? The ureter wall has three main layers, just like many tubes in the body, like mucosa, the inner layer, muscular layer, middle layer, and adventitia, the outer layer. So let's explain each layer in a very simple way. The first layer is mucosa layer, which is the inner layer. So it is made up of the transitional epithelium, which is also called as the urothelium. So this is a special type of epithelium which is found in the urinary organs. So it can stretch when the ureter fills with the urine. So when the ureter is empty, the epithelium appears folded or wrinkled. So what is lamina propria? Lamina propria, it is a layer of loose connective tissue below the epithelium. It contains the elastic fibers and also it allows the stretching. So now what is the function of the mucosa? It protects the ureter from urine which is acidic or toxic. So it allows the ureter to expand and collapse depending upon the urine flow. So the second layer is muscular layer, which is a middle layer. So muscular layer is the most important layer because it creates the peristaltis, which is a rhythmic contractions that pushes the urine to the bladder. So it consists of upper 2/3 of the ureter has inner longitudinal muscle and outer circular muscle, whereas lower 1/3 part of ureter has an additional outer longitudinal layer. So the lower end has 3 layers of muscles. So now why extra muscle is at the lower part? Because of this stronger contractions needed to push urine into the bladder. So that's why we need extra muscle at the lower part. So this also prevents the backflow and it helps to overcome the bladder pressure. So kidney stones, they often get stuck at these points where the peristaltis is weak or the lumen narrows. So this is about the muscular layer, and the third structure of the ureter is adventitia. So it is made up of loose connective tissue which helps to anchor the ureter to nearby the structures. So what does this contain? Blood vessels, nerves and lymphatics. So what is the function of the adventitia? So what is the function? It supplies nutrients to ureter and also it provides a stretch and movement. So here you can see a cross section of the ureter diagram. So whenever you see in this microscope, you can see this picture, and here you can see this lumen, which is the central space where the urine flows. and the mucosa, it is the inner line folded, right? So muscular layers, which is a middle rings, and this muscular layer consists of inner longitudinal and outer circular, and adventitia, it is a outermost thin layer. So transitional epithelium is unique, which is only the urinary tract, and the stone obstruction pain comes mainly from the muscular spasms. So this is a cross-section diagram of the ureter. You can see all the layers of this ureter. And next is blood supply. So how blood supply is done to ureter? So the ureter does not receive blood from one single artery. So instead, multiple small segmental arteries, they supply the different parts of it along with the path from the kidney to the bladder. So we divide the blood supply into two main parts. The one is abdominal ureter and the second is pelvic ureter. So in the abdominal ureter, so the section lies in the abdomen from the renal pelvis to the pelvic brim. So it is supplied by renal artery, like it comes directly from the abdominal aorta. It gives the small branches to the upper ureter. And the gonadal arteries, so this is the testicular artery in males and also the ovarian artery in the females. So these arteries, they run downwards, giving the branches to the middle part of the abdominal ureter. And the third is abdominal aorta. It directly sends the small branches to the ureter along its descent. So the second supply is pelvic ureter. So this part of the pelvic ureter, it's a lower part, right? So it enters the pelvis and reaches the urinary bladder. It is mainly supplied by the branches of the internal iliac artery. So the internal iliac artery branches are, these branches will supply the most pelvic organs, including the pelvic ureter. How? Superior vesical artery, like this artery, it supplies the upper part of the bladder and also it gives twigs to the lower ureter. And the inferior vesical artery, which is present in male, so it supplies the prostate, seminal vesicles, bladder base and also part of the lower ureter. And the fourth is uterine and vaginal arteries, which is present in females. So this artery, it crosses over the ureter and it gives important branches to the lower pelvic ureter. The vaginal artery, it also contributes the small branches. So this is how blood supply is done to ureter. So now why blood supply is important clinically? Because it helps in ureteric surgery, ureteric injury during hysterectomy, and also it has a major role in the kidney transplant. So this is about the ureter structure. So this is for today's session. I hope this session has helped you. So in the next session, you will be able to learn about the anatomy of urinary bladder and also about the urethra. Thank you.